Good afternoon. I'm Frank Rivak, and we are standing on Meia Praia Beach, southern Portugal. It's a beautiful day. We're presently in COVID lockdown. We can walk on the beach, but no restaurants open, so we claimed this one just for today. Many places that offer food claim to have the best soup in the world, or the biggest steaks in Texas, or the best kimchi in South Korea, or even the best wurst in Germany. And many cultures, they will have several big festivals or feasts every year so that they can show off their best dishes. The tables will be filled with all kinds of food and lots of it. I've seen many of these celebrations and they look great to me. I might even agree with them that theirs is the best that I've ever seen, with so many foods laid out and decorations. I wouldn't know how to explain it to someone. And it's one of those things that I think you pretty much have to see it to describe it. You have to experience it to appreciate it. You see, I believe that God's table is like that, and that's what we're going to speak about today. Some have said that God's table is the biggest and best that there is. The feast table that God has set before us and set before the hungry world and has put on display by his followers of Jesus and can be seen in those that follow him. It's more than just a display. It's believers in Jesus are to participate in it, partake of it, and offer it to others. It's not the only table that's set before mankind, but I believe it's the only one set out by God. There's the table of human success and the table of human power and the table of human possessions. And they are man's best effort, and they are very nice, but they are not from God. They are from men. See, the table of God is not only a banquet table, but it delivers something. It delivers purpose and peace. And it is able to deliver what it claims that it can. By that I mean that the other tables are temporary at best. They're an illusion that will not last, and they cannot deliver on what they are promising. The real spread should be easy to spot, and that should clear up the problem for all of us. But one of the problems is that many followers of Jesus have never invited others to God's table because they themselves have never seen what is on God's table. They have never experienced what God has spread out before his followers to be offered to the world. They cannot tell what they do not know, and they cannot explain what they have not seen. No wonder the world has rejected the table that Christians are describing. It looks more like an optional snack tray than the full buffet that God has laid out. I understand some of the confusion that could come from this. You see, many of us have very different ideas about what a real feast or spread is. Some of us approach spread preparation by assessing the number of people and laying out what we think they need. No more, no less. Having too much is a bigger problem than having too little. Having a lot left over is considered wasteful and a reflection of poor planning. As a planner, we decide what those in attendance will get. We know that they'll not go hungry. There are other things out there that they can have. It's designed to be just adequate. For others, though, it's completely different. You display a lot of different things on your table, and you display a lot of those different things. Your greatest concern is not offering enough, but offering everything that represents all that you have, all that's available. You want people to have more than enough because you know that there is a lot to offer. Meeting all the needs and having a lot available reflects a good planner, a generous planner. Who knows who will show up unexpectedly. You need to meet their needs also. Do you see what I mean? The difference in the two, the perception of what a spread is. But I'm thinking that's enough talk about food, but you get my point. There are different ideas about what a great feast is. Today we'll look at what God has placed on his banquet table to the world. And I'd like to start by reading some scripture. This is Revelation chapter 3, verse 22. Revelation 3:22. This is Jesus talking, and he says, "Here I am. I stand at the door and knock. And if anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with him, and he with me." The first thing that God brings to his table is closeness. Yes, there is some degree of warning in these verses when we see Jesus on the outside and the possibility that someone may not let him in. But what I see here is Jesus doing an act of love, wanting to be invited in, coming to them first. Another thing in this verse from Revelations that you may have not seen, because it's not that clear. In the NIV translation, it says, "I will come in and eat with them." But in the older translation, it uses this word sup, S-U-P. And the word means a different type of meal. But you see, the common people around Jesus' time had 3 meals a day. Breakfast was basically a piece of bread dipped in some wine. And the second was a lunch, a simple snack that you would kind of eat wherever you could stop to eat it. But the third, the word that Jesus uses here, means that evening meal, that main meal, the one where people would just hang out at the end of the workday. Jesus is saying here, if you will answer my knock, I will come in and we will have a slow and easy meal, and we'll just kind of hang out. We'll have fellowship. We will have closeness. Here Jesus is knocking at the door of our heart, our mind, and asking to come in. Now that is no small thing when you think about it. No other religion that I know of has this image of God seeking man. The Jewish rabbi believed that God might seek a man if that man was seeking him. In Eastern religions, man takes the initiative to seek, not God. Here's a picture of Jesus Christ seeking a sinful man who does not even know him or want him if he does. The desire for closeness can go no further than this. Are the followers of Jesus telling the lost world that there's this closeness offered on God's table? Let's look at what else is on God's table. It's found in Matthew chapter 11, verse 28 through 30. Matthew 11, 28 through 30. And it reads, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your soul. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Jesus is speaking to people both now and then who are desperately trying to find God, desperately trying to do good, but instead they are tired and in despair and finding the task impossible. Jesus is saying here, your weary search is over, and it ends with me. A good friend of mine who was living in Japan at the time had been looking for a church home for 3 years, and it had not been going well. And he wrote me this email, and he titled it, "Empty." Let me read some of it to you. He says, "As I have said earlier, I made a visit to a church that I had visited once before, and here is what I believe I saw. There had been a change in the position of pastor, but their words were still empty. All the same, without power. They seemed adapted, entertaining on the days that the congregation assembled, but nothing I see or hear benefits me or anyone or any visitor there. More than once, they have reminded the congregation not to forsake the assembly of themselves, as a reminder that all need to keep coming back each week. But I don't feel convicted. Not once has anyone tried to reason or to show love to me. He continues, but you hear the tired and weariness in his voice. They had just had a child, and that child had Down syndrome when he sent this to me. He needed to find God's table and God's people, and soon. Another thing that God brings to his table is rest. Few Christians speak of it because few Christians know of it. Too many people's lives are nothing but heavy burdens. For many, the Christian life is just a long list of thou shalt nots. Jesus does not deny that there is some of that in there, but it is not what we think. Jesus says, come to me, all of you who are weighted down beneath this burden, and I will give you rest. And then he makes this very strange statement. He says, take my yoke upon you. Now, what does that mean? It sounds to me like one more burden. See, a yoke is something you put on a work animal. They were made of wood, and they went around the animal's neck. Most of you know what this feels like. But Jesus says, my yoke is easy. The Greek word used here for easy is well fitted. And that is the answer to true rest. Jesus says, the life I give to you is not a burden designed to hurt you, but a task that is custom measured and built to fit you. It is a benefit to you. Jesus says, my yoke is easy and the burden I give you is light. The task which is given in love and carried in love is always light. So what else does God lay on his table? We're going to read Mark, verse 1. Chapter 1, verse 17. It says, come follow me, Jesus said, and I will make you fishers of men. With this verse, we see that his calling is a call to adventure. Those that accept Jesus' offer need to know that if they say yes to his call, they will be in for a life of adventure. It's like riding a bicycle built for two, and you move from the front of the bike with the handlebars to the back seat of the bike, the seat with no control. The first disciples who accepted Jesus' invitation experienced radical change, leaving the safety and security of what they knew for the risk of an unknown future. In this great adventure he calls us to, he promises us that our souls will find our unique shape in the world. What else does God lay on his feast table? Let's reread Mark 1:17. He says, come follow me, Jesus said, and I will make you fishers of men. With this verse, he lays out purpose. Purpose. This is no small thing either, to know our purpose. Why are we here, and what are we to do while we are here? Most people struggle with the question of purpose. In Jesus' personal invitation to follow him, he is not asking us to join some cause or learn some philosophy. He is not saying, follow me and I will help you do your thing. He is saying, it is time to do my thing. Now, what does his thing look like? Well, it's a message that is real and life-changing. It is love that has flesh on it. It is power that belongs to him, and he will use it to open the door to the world. Now that is purpose. That is adventure. God's not finished with his table yet. Revelation chapter 22, verse 17. The Spirit and the bride say, come. And let him who hears say, come. Whoever is thirsty, let him come, and whoever wishes, let him take the free gift of the water of life. Now, would you come to a table that offered fulfillment? Would you invite others to that table as well? This verse is a 3-point invitation to fulfillment. The language here implies that the Spirit here is the voice of Jesus himself, and the bride are those who follow Jesus. Jesus and his followers say, come and be filled with the free gift of the water of life. Now the next invitation it is for those who have heard and believe. Every Jesus follower is to be a missionary. That means to be on mission. They should shout, come. He who has been found by Jesus wants to share this with others. Now, the last invitation is open to all who are thirsty for fulfillment. The Old Testament prophet Isaiah put it like this: come, all of you who are thirsty, come to the water, and you who have no money, come and eat. Come and buy wine and milk without money or cost. Jesus himself promises this in John chapter 6, verse 35. He says, he who comes to me shall not hunger. He who believes in me shall never thirst. Come to God's table if you're looking for fulfillment. Now, there's something else on the table that I must tell you about. It's a tough one. It's Matthew 16:24, and it reads, then Jesus said to his disciples, if anyone would come after me, he must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. Someone once rephrased it like this: grace that God offers is free, but it is not cheap. What does this mean? It means that for those who do partake of God's table, there will be a sacrifice, a cost. There will be change. There are 3 things that are required for us, or for some, as some have said, that will happen within us to fulfill a life, the Christian life. The first has to do with self. Jesus put it in these terms: we must deny ourselves. Now, what does that look like in our lives? It means that we would have to give up our right to take revenge on someone, or to hate an enemy, or to hold a grudge. That doesn't mean that we do not seek justice, but that we know that we serve a God who knows how to accomplish what is needed, both in this person and in us. I'll give you a brief example of what this looks like to me. My daughter was killed by her husband 11 years ago, the father of their 1-year-old and 3-year-old children at the time, a man who was raised in a Christian home. Was I heartbroken and devastated? Of course. Did I seek justice? Yes, legally. He is in prison for 25 years. Do I allow my heart to be consumed with hatred and anger? No. I chose to lay all of this at the feet of Jesus. He is the one that put peace in my heart. He is the one that set me free from the prison of unforgiveness, the prison of hatred, of anger, of bitterness. God's love enabled me to focus on loving the grandchildren and praying that they would not harbor anger or hatred or unforgiveness in their hearts, because I know that if they do, it will only hinder them and their relationship with God and with others. We would also have to give up our right to live by our own rules, to put ourselves first, to demand our rights instead of acknowledging our responsibilities. Jesus is not talking about a little self-denial occasionally when we can fit it in. He's requiring us every moment of every day to say no to self and yes to him. Part of living like sin is not our boss is like living like God is. He requires us to dethrone ourselves and acknowledge that he is entitled to that position. Second, Christians must take up their cross. What does that mean? When Jesus carried his cross up Golgotha to be crucified, no one was thinking that the cross was some kind of symbol of a burden to carry. To a person in the first century, the cross meant one thing and one thing only: death by the most painful and humiliating means that human beings could develop. Crucifying the world to ourselves and ourselves to the world means we don't find anything in this world superior, much less equal to, following Jesus. Not our accomplishments, our possessions, or our reputations. We stake our worth on Jesus. Taking up our cross to follow Jesus simply means commitment to the point of placing our hopes and our dreams and our possessions and even our very life, if it need be, into the hands, his hands, as we obediently accept his guidance. Luke says Jesus uses the word daily to describe taking up our cross. It is a way of life, not something we just fit in when it's convenient. It will be the opposite, though, of just sitting back and waiting. It'll be like trying to keep up. That's what it looks like. Now, third, we are told that we must follow Christ. And you would think that this would probably be easier than the other two. But consider the requirements and what they might look like. Would you still follow Jesus if it meant losing your closest friends? Would you still follow Jesus if it meant alienating you from your family? Or what if it meant losing your reputation? Or if it meant losing your job? Or what if it meant actually losing your life? Would you still follow Jesus? This could easily be the cost that he calls us to. Any of these or more. Following Jesus means walking in his footsteps wherever he goes. Now, the next item on God's table, I know you'll like this one. It's found in Matthew 22, 1 and 2, and it reads, Jesus spoke to them again in parables, saying, the kingdom of heaven is like a king who prepared a wedding banquet for his son. The word here, party. God knows how to throw a party. A party that Jesus is describing in this parable is so big that the king sends out an invitation without a date on it because it will take weeks and maybe months to prepare. And when everything is ready, he sent his servants out to tell everyone to come. Everyone invited had plenty of time to tell the king if he didn't plan on coming, but instead they waited to the last minute and insultingly refused. Let me pick up verse 3 and 4. He sent his servants to those who had been invited to the banquet to tell them to come, but they refused to come. Then he sent more servants and said, tell those who have been invited that I have prepared my dinner. My oxen, my fatted cattle have been butchered and prepared. Everything is ready. Come to the wedding banquet. But it says they paid no attention and they went off. One to his field and another to his business, one to his home. Then he said to his servant, the wedding banquet is ready, but those I have invited do not deserve to come. Verse 20, he continues, go into the street corners and invite to the banquet anyone you find. So the servants went out into the streets and gathered all the people they could find, both good and bad, and the wedding hall was filled with guests. I want to point out two things in these verses. God has invited everyone to the best party ever. It's a joyous wedding feast. Nothing is lacking. It is to joy that the people have been invited. And if they don't see that, it's their loss. He has provided everything. Now, the second thing I want you to see is What caused the people in the story to refuse the king wasn't necessarily a bad thing that they had done. One went home, one went to his business. It is so easy for people to get so busy and preoccupied that they forget about eternal things, things that last. We can be so busy making a living that we forget to make a life. Second best will always rob us of best. In the end of the parable, the feast comes to those who accept it. It was grace, or a free gift that is offered in the invitation that gathered them in. No one earned it. No one had to earn the invitation. They just had to come. A few years ago, I spent 16 days in South Africa in some of the poorest townships in Cape Town and up the west coast. In the morning, the team offered a Bible lesson and related projects to over 400 to 500 children in a church or a rented building. The children were given a message of hope and love through Jesus and a free lunch. Twice we did that, 4 days successively. First and then a larger group the second time. And we always gave an invitation to accept Jesus into their life. We were told that this lunch we gave them was probably the only meal, but if not the only, at least the best that they would receive that day. They needed to know God's spread, not only just spiritually, but nutritionally. In the evening, I spoke at a number of different churches. Messages again of freedom and love and forgiveness, followed by an invitation inviting them to come to Jesus, the life-changing thing that was offered to them. I also gave 2 half-day seminars on the Saturdays to church leadership in an attempt to discuss and resolve some of the problems that they were facing in their churches. Most of the problems were the same as other churches. How to get more people to come, how to get the young people involved, how to get everyone more connected to the church so that it would run smoother. Many of their concerns had the same underlying theme: how do we keep the church going? It sounded like they were trying to sell something and nobody was buying it. The problem they were having is the same problem that other churches, but it's not the one that you think it is. The problem again was, what were we trying to involve and invite people to? Many believers, again, never invited others to God's true table, the one I've been talking about, because they themselves have never seen it. They have never seen what is on God's table. Many believers are dissatisfied where they attend because that's all that's there. But they don't know what to do about it. For them, the last thing they need is another organizational meeting that meets on Sunday that they feel guilty about not attending. And when seekers come, those are those who want to check out this Jesus thing. They look around, they're smart. They notice it also. Many believers have never experienced what God has spread out before his people. So they cannot tell of what they do not know and show what they've not seen. All they can say is, come to my church, because all they have is their church attendance experience. That is clearly not enough to sustain anyone in this troubled world. They need something that will carry them when they are not around church buildings and church people. They must have an ongoing personal relationship with a living God. They must avail themselves to all that God has laid on his table. That is his desire. You see, in the real world, people are dying, lives are in the balance, families are on the brink. Eternity is at stake here. Share Jesus. Christians must be ready to speak out about God's buffet table through their daily lives. Every day. The message is the same for those in South Africa. It's for us. Come to Jesus. He has spread his table out to us. One of the places you can hear about that and see God's table is where Christians assemble, hopefully. Another place you could see this God's table is lived out through the followers of Jesus, where they live where they work, where they play. Christians do play. If not, they need to look for another Jesus, because the one I know, that's on his table. After all you've heard today, you cannot say you haven't heard about God's buffet, the one that he has prepared for you. And after all you've heard, you cannot say that you were not invited. I just did. I would say, come and taste his banquet, and do not give up until you've tasted everything that he has laid out for you. Amen? Amen.